I had to restart because I wasn't sure if my microphone was working. Not sure what happened with that. Okay, so I'm going to continue. I think that my sound was okay, but I'm taking out my microphone so there's no issues. Okay, so where we were was talking about this past case that's being cited. Need some error for a second. Okay. Okay, so it's citing to this past case called Ashcraft, where apparently this person was found, this defendant was found in a high drug volume area, an area known for a lot of drugs, with a large amount of cash, and from that alone, he was found guilty, apparently, I don't know the case, I'm just going off what is mentioned here, of constructively trying to possess drugs. Now, what the defendant in that case argued is that the evidence was insufficient to support that jury's verdict because the jury could have made multiple inferences from him having a lot of cash in that area, and they chose an inference that he was guilty when it could have been, there's other possible inferences that could have been made. And so that's, the defendant there argued that it's speculation. But apparently the Supreme Court rejected Ashcraft's argument, explaining that the fact that a court could identify an equally plausible alternative inference is not nearly enough to set a verdict aside. This is because the law is well established that the existence of one or more alternate reasonable hypotheses does not necessarily prevent the jury from concluding that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Rather, the jury's exclusive province is to weigh the competing theories of the case in light of the evidence presented and the reasonable inferences drawn therefrom, and to conclude which one they believe. Now, these contexts that are being cited to are in the context of a jury case, jury trial, where the jury is making inferences, but the prosecution in this brief is just using them to explain the definition of inference versus speculation. Oh, that feels really good. Give me a few seconds here, I'm going to turn it off. Hey, hi Alita, hi EJ, thanks for joining. I just came across, this is my second video, my last one I had to end because I wasn't sure if my mic was even going. But I wanted to put a video out because I just downloaded the reply brief in the Tyler Robinson case by the prosecution, and I thought if I need to study this anyways because I'm going on some guest spots tomorrow, so might as well study this with you guys. So I'm reading it for the first time. It's okay. It's kind of bothering me, and I just needed it to cool me down for a second. So anyways, just to catch you up, right now the prosecution is arguing that the judge is allowed to make inferences, and he's supposed to make inferences in favor of the state at this stage, and arguing that the defense argument that he would be engaging in speculation, specifically when it comes to the aggravating circumstance, is incorrect, that it's not speculation. It's actually just drawing reasonable inferences. So that pretty much catches everyone up. I'm not gonna read actually out loud because it's a lot of reading. And a lot of this is kind of just legalese and stuff. I will read it quietly and summarize. And maybe just read a few sentences here and there. Quote, a preliminary hearing magistrating is not. The magistrate must view all evidence in the light most favorable to the prosecution and draw all reasonable inferences in favor of the prosecution. At a preliminary hearing, the prosecution is not required to eliminate alternative inferences that could be drawn from the evidence in favor of the defense. So, thus, viewing all reasonable inferences in the state's favor at a preliminary hearing is not speculation. It is precisely what the law requires this court to do. Defendant's argument otherwise is based on overruled case law that he refuses to acknowledge and bring to the court's attention. This blatant omission violates counsel's duty of candor to the court. See Utah Rules of Professional Conduct. Wow. To have a prosecutor accuse you of ethical misconduct as a defense lawyer is it's pretty harsh. What they're saying here is that the defense counsel knew that there was overriding case law to what was cited, and they're choosing to mislead the court, which is an ethical violation. Not usual, at least in my experience, for opposing counsel to accuse you of intentionally misleading the court. I think maybe what they're trying to say is that they, AI is so ubiquitous now. I wouldn't be surprised if both sides use a little bit of AI to help. I mean, I would think that in a case this serious, they're probably double, triple, quadruple checking everything. But I think that they're kind of implying, like, look, they didn't double check their sources here because they're relying on overturned case law. That's a big no-no. And it's actually quoting the rules of professional conduct. So that's rather surprising. The case law they used was odd. I mean, maybe it was more. I mean, these are Utah cases, so maybe it's more clear. And if the judge agrees, you could the defense lawyers might be sanctioned, but that's surprising to call them out like that. Okay, moreover, an inference is reasonable as opposed to speculative when it is based on evidence. Okay, so again, going on between why what the prosecution is asking for here are reasonable inferences. It's not speculation, specifically referring to the aggravating circumstance. I think that even before this, like if there was no reply brief filed, the judge was unlikely to be persuaded by the defense argument on the aggravating circumstance. And when I talked with Jared, Continued Freedom, this came up. It just seems like common sense. When you're shooting a high-powered rifle at somebody who is speaking in a large crowd, you are knowingly creating a great risk of death to others, almost by definition. So I didn't think that was a winning argument. Common sense is allowed in courtrooms. Okay, so number 2. When properly construed, the evidence demonstrates a reasonable belief that defendant knowingly created a great risk of death to another when he fired a high-powered rifle toward a crowd of thousands, including several who were in the line of fire or otherwise in close proximity to Mr. Kirk. That's basically the conclusion of this subsection. Just as he misrepresents the legal standard governing preliminary hearing, defendant also misrepresents the standard for establishing the great risk of death aggravator. The existence of that aggravator does not require a minimum set of factual circumstances which must be present, as defendant claims. Defendant's own. Nor is the test a multi-factor analysis, as defendant also claims. When the evidence is properly viewed under the test the Utah Supreme Court has actually endorsed, the evidence demonstrates a reasonable belief that the aggravating circumstance is satisfied here. Okay. So now it's attacking some of the arguments presented in the defense brief. And again, that's like the whole point of this reply brief, is not to bring up new arguments or new points, new evidentiary pieces, but rather to just attack the defendant's argument. So here it's saying defendant misrepresents the applicable test for whether he knowingly created a great risk of death. It says that Utah Supreme, so it's talking about case cited by the defense saying that there's three factors that must be present or must be balanced to determine whether or not the great risk of death is established. The prosecution is saying, no, it's a range of factors that might be relevant to the statutory inquiry, but it doesn't need to be always. Again, kind of just saying that the defense cherry-picked parts of these case citations, which is normal. You obviously bring up parts that are good for you, but usually if a case overall is not good for your argument, you try to find some other case. And here it's saying that this case is actually not good for the defense. They just cherry-pick portions while ignoring other portions. A high probability of death is just another way to say a great risk of death. That makes sense. So it's not that there has to be a high probability any different than it has to be great risk. Saying that the fact that other cases are not completely identical doesn't really take away the fact that in this case the defendant created a great risk of death. Just because other cases it was more obvious, being multiple shots or what have you, doesn't mean that this doesn't apply in this case. I agree with the prosecution here. And it's going on here. The next pages, again, this is all just highlighting the points that there is knowledge about a great risk of death. That element is satisfied, and so the aggravating circumstance is satisfied here. Number 1, it says great risk of death to those who are within the line of fire. Defendant knowingly created a great risk of death to those near Mr. Kirk, not just in the line of fire. It goes on to say that the evidence also supports reasonable inference that defendant knew that people were in the area behind Kirk's tent. Defendant visited the amphitheater area at least twice before. So that supports a reasonable inference that he saw the area behind his tent. Saying that the defense is saying, based on certain details, you can infer that defendant didn't know about the others at risk of death. But prosecution is arguing that here at this stage, this judge is supposed to, when there's multiple inferences that can be made, they're supposed to choose the one most favorable to the state at this stage. Just highlighting specific details, that it wasn't just the 35 to 44 seconds that he was in the prone position, but all the time before he actually got in the prone position, that you could have noticed all these other people that were at great risk of death, and so forth. Here we go. This is what I was saying. Common sense also dictates that firing a gun, especially a high-powered rifle, towards others puts them at great risk of death. Yes, common sense is allowed. That is precisely why gun ranges prohibit shooters from even handling a firearm when others are downrange beyond the firing line. He actually cites to shooting sports park range safety rules to show that. But again, it's just common sense. Here it's distinguishing it from another case where the defendant was found not to create a great risk of death when he fired at a store manager at point blank range, but the court also noted that no other person was within the immediate vicinity or within the line of fire. So that's very distinct. Okay. Defendant's arguments that the evidence does not establish probable cause to satisfy the great risk of death aggravator are also unpersuasive because they ignore evidence and improperly view other evidence and reasonable inferences in a light most favorable to him. Defendant's argument that he did not have to reassemble his grandfather's rifle ignores the evidence that the rifle was in at least two pieces because he was both walking with a limp and carrying a backpack as he approached and climbed onto the roof. It also ignores the fact that defendant left a screwdriver on the roof near the railing that he flopped over to access the sniper's perch. Defendant omits the screwdriver on the roof from his recitation of the facts. And even if defendant could have concealed the entire rifle in his pant leg, transporting it that way supports a reasonable inference that the scope would not be in the same position that it occupied when defendant sighted in the rifle, assuming that he did so before the shooting. The targets found in defendant's apartment and the 4 engraved cartridges loaded in the rifle likewise support the reasonable inference that defendant knew he might miss. Yeah, and that's just common sense also. Defendant's argument that the targets might be completely unrelated to the murder is undermined by their continued presence in his apartment and the discovery of a cartridge in his apartment that he had engraved with the words "test shot." And whether those targets are related to the murder or not, their presence in defendant's apartment supports a reasonable inference that they record his shots. The targets show that he seldom hit the bullseye and sometimes missed the target altogether. Yeah, I mean, that's just another point. Okay. Hi everyone, by the way. I just wanted to read this. You guys don't have to be here. I was reading it anyways, and so I decided to do a live to share it. But if you guys have somewhere else that you want to be, I will not be offended. Okay, now let's get into the question about the one that I actually think the defense is going to succeed on, which is count 6. Defendant's argument that he did not obstruct justice by directing his roommate to not talk to police improperly draws the inference in his favor. Contrary to defendant's assertion, his direction to Mr. Twiggs to not talk to police does not unequivocally demonstrate that the defendant meant only to help Mr. Twiggs rather than obstruct an investigation. Defendant's argument otherwise improperly draws the inferences in his favor. Moreover, defendant ignores that his direction to Mr. Twiggs about the police came in the same conversation which defendant also directed Mr. Twiggs to delete their incriminating text messages. Yeah, but you charged him for that already. The conversation also included defendant explaining how he concealed his rifle and changed his clothing. Although defendant claims to contextualize his statement to Mr. Twiggs, he actually ignores the full context of his statement. Ignoring incriminating evidence does not make it go away. Properly viewed, the evidence supports a reasonable inference that defendant intended to obstruct an investigation when he instructed Mr. Twiggs not to talk to police. The evidence therefore requires binding defendant over on count 6, witness tampering. If you notice here, that was a very short argument. Not even a page. Could that mean that I'm right? And that even the prosecution realizes count 6 might be a lost cause? We'll see. And number 4. The evidence supports a reasonable inference that defendant knew that at least one child was present when he shot Mr. Kirk. And Apprendi, this case, does not require the state to establish this aggravating factor or the victim targeting sentencing enhancement at this preliminary hearing. Okay. So this is to count 7 and the aggravating circumstance. I'm sorry, not aggravating circumstance. The victim targeting sentencing enhancement. Defendant ignores evidence that he was at the amphitheater area at least twice on the morning of the shooting, including eating lunch at the Sorensen Center that borders the amphitheater. So this goes to show that it's a reasonable inference that he saw that there were children present. But even if the evidence was limited to just the time defendant was on the roof, he could see the entire crowd from that vantage point. That evidence alone supports reasonable inference that he knew at least one child was present. I agree. So the aggravating factors, which are different than the aggravating circumstance, it's kind of confusing. For counts 1 and 2, which is the violent offense in the presence of a child, which is different than count 7 being the discharge of a firearm in the presence of a child. As well as the victim targeting enhancement being that it was politically motivated. This goes on to argue that none of this stuff needs to be shown even up to a probable cause standard during the preliminary hearing. And finishes up with, it separated it to the last one about the political motivation. I think all those are going to be successful. You want to hear, you want to hear what? Me read the whole thing, EJ? I don't think I'm going to read the whole thing. But I can email it to you. No. So I want to be clear, and I'm going to bring this up to Josh tomorrow. The defense is not admitting guilt. What they are arguing is, what they're doing is saying that we're not going to argue about the evidence against his guilt for the murder right now. Because they know that there's no point to it. He's going to be bound over 100%. He's going to be bound over for murder. He's going to be bound over for most of the counts. But the defense is saying, let's just assume, for the sake of argument, all the evidence is true, everything else is true. Still, you shouldn't go after the aggravating circumstance isn't here, and count 6 isn't here, and count 7 isn't here, and the aggravating factors and the victim targeting enhancement aren't here. That's their argument. But to say that they're admitting guilt, I think that's a mischaracterization. They're not. And really that would be malpractice if they did at this stage. So I know that's what a lot of people were saying, and I think that we should just be honest. The defense is not admitting guilt. They are saying that they're implying that the evidence is so strong right now that it's pointless to even fight it at the prelim stage. We're going to focus where we can. And they focus it a lot on the aggravating factor circumstance. That was their biggest focus. I think they're right to do it because that's the main thing, is they want to save their client. Even if they get all 6 of the other charges dropped somehow, which he would still be facing the death penalty. So it made sense for them. Let's fight against the death penalty. That's not going to succeed. None of this is going to succeed, in my opinion, except count 6. And I could be wrong. Maybe more will succeed. Maybe none of it will. But I think count 6 will succeed. And I feel a little vindicated because if you look at out of 19 pages, the prosecution spent about a half a page arguing in favor of count 6. Where is it? Yeah. See this? from section 3. Not even, yeah, about half a page. So, as I said, this is not earth-shattering, but since I just discover that this came out, I wanted to get on the live and read through it with everyone. Does anyone have any other questions? Yeah, I was watching Milk Bar, but I wanted to do this live. So no other questions. We good? You guys are on Nick Mattel or Nick Brooks? Let me see. Oops. I'll join you if Nick Brooks is live. Nick Mattel, I like Nick Mattel, but I want to chat with people, and when there's a million people in the chat, I can't chat with. So you guys are talking about Nick Mattel? Got you. Okay. Well, anyways, thank you for joining me. I wanted to read this. Catch me tomorrow on LLC, I think 11 a.m. Pacific, and then Josh Carr, I think around 3 to 3:30 Pacific. It might be a little bit closer to 3:30, 3:20. Happy birthday, Alita. Alita. Everyone say happy birthday to Alita. We find out on, not necessarily, that's when the argument is, the oral argument. It's possible, but my guess is with the way this judge is really taking his sweet time, we're probably going to have to wait at least a week. That's my guess. But I don't know. Oh, happy birthday to S-Files. Well, I know her name, but I'm not going to dox her. Happy birthday, both of you. First and second. What does that make you guys? What is that, Virgo? What are we in? I don't know my horoscope. B-Day twins. I'm May. I'm the end of May, so. What sign are you guys? Virgo, Pisces? I have no idea. I really only know my sign. Virgo. I guess they're right. I had a feeling. I think there was some association with September and Virgo in my head. Cool, Virgo. Well, happy birthday. Remind me when it's closer. I just like talking with you guys. That's why I keep doing these live when I can. And I like talking more than typing, so it's like, it's more fun for me, you know? So, I don't know how exciting it is for people that aren't engaging in the chat to just watch me chat with people. But it's, I enjoy it. And keep sharing my videos and content. But I do have like kind of an axe to grind with somebody. So if I end up being proven right on dropping the count 6 but nothing else, I'm gonna do some victory laps for that. Are you guys East Coast? Are you like college students staying up this late? Man, I miss those days. Thank you, Alita. Thank you. Everybody, if you haven't already, subscribe to S Files. I think everyone here probably has. S Files, you're East Coast, both of you? East Coast? Wow. We got some insomniacs. You're a night owl. Cool. I used to be. I haven't been this past year. But I used to be. North Carolina, cool. By the way, Alita, North Carolina, my favorite accent. My favorite accent. Whenever I talk with like somebody on tech support or something from North Carolina, I love, it's like a very, it's like a little bit of Southern, but classy. Really classy. I love North Carolina accent. Yeah. Okay, well, I guess that was it. Um, if I had to summarize, most of this argument was just saying that the defense was kind of being a little disingenuous. I'm kind of surprised that they went as far as to say that they're intentionally misleading the court or concealing the court other case law in violation of ethical duties. That's like, if I'm going to go up against another attorney that accuses me of that, my disposition becomes different. I like to be really cordial with opposing counsel, and I'm like accommodating. I'll give them extensions when it's, because I might want them to return the favor one day. But if they start being an asshole to me, I return that favor just as quickly. So to me, this is like daggers drawn. We're accusing you of intentionally misleading the court. Now I'm out to get you. And that is my view sometimes when going against prosecutors, because some of them are assholes. But in civil law, I try to just, at least in the beginning, I'm like, let's work together. We both have to represent our clients vigorously. We're obviously on different sides, but that doesn't mean we can't be professional and courteous. But if somebody accuses me of unethical conduct, oof, I'm gonna come back hard. So that was yeah, no worries as files. So that was kind of like the most surprising thing from this. But the main point was just that, look, common sense and reasonable inferences, not speculation, can lead you to think that can be drawn by the court that Tyler Robinson knew that he was putting a lot of people at great risk of death when he took that shot. And especially at this stage, the court is supposed to draw those inferences in the favor of the prosecution. And therefore, the aggravating circumstance must be bound over along with everything else. That was the big bulk of this reply brief, which makes sense because that was the bulk of the defendant's brief. Very little on count 6. Almost like they know that they're going to lose it. Almost. Maybe that's just not that I want count 6 to be dropped, but I think I'll be proven right. on count 6, it's not going to make a difference for Tyler Robinson, getting count 6 dropped. It's like a very Pyrrhic victory. It's like, oh, okay, instead of being put to death and getting 150 years, you're going to be put to death and get 145 years. Congratulations, But whatever, I mean, the defense is better than nothing. But anyways, very little effort was put to counter that. Then arguing that all the enhancements, the other it's called aggravating factors, not to be confused with aggravating circumstance, but aggravating factors being presence of children. Charlie Kirk specifically targeted for political motivations or his political beliefs. That doesn't even have to be shown at this stage. So that's kind of moot. Count 7, kind of similar, but it's saying that there can be a lot of reasonable inferences that he knew there was at least one child present because of his multiple visits and so forth. So I think they're going to succeed on all that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, EJ's right. That's what the judge is supposed to, how the judge is supposed to rule, saying that questions of fact is meant for the jury. I'm supposed to just make the basic reasonable inferences at this stage in favor of the prosecution. But I still think count 6 is going to be dropped. Yeah, the aggravated circumstance will stay. I wouldn't bet on something like that, but if I were to, yes, I would bet. Death penalty will stay. Yeah, S-Files, no worry. Look, if you're up now, then I don't blame you for wanting to sleep in tomorrow. I know you guys are always with me in spirit. Okay, you guys, I guess I'm going to call it a night. Thank you so much for joining me. And check me out tomorrow on LLC and Josh Carr. Good night. Stay sane.